Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, a regular retrospective on Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is your other Bahatic host,
Brian. Hi, how's it going?
Haberdashk maybe? Literally as I approached like the end of the sentence, I was like, what can I see here? You're wearing a hat.
There's like I would say there's like 3 or 4 episodes recently where I've been wearing a hat at the beginning of the episode because I've realized that like wearing a hat when you wake up in the morning, when you go out for a walk, is better than feeling weird about how your hair looks bad. So that's been my I'm now hatted in the mornings, but you've referred to it like 8 different introductions to Buffy
I just
Boys.
really like your hat.
Okay,
I think it's a really cute era for you.
Era. I've been listening to so much of a podcast about indie music, and it's affected everything about my life. It's IndieCast, which is I think it's a reasonably minor podcast as podcasts go, but reasonably big compared to us. But it's just 2 guys. One of whom is Ian Cohen, who I would have like read every review of his by accident on Pitchfork. But they just talk about indie and emo and other music, and it's all I can think about at the moment. So yeah, I'm sorry if I'm worse because of it.
You're always, kind of that guy who listens. I suppose what I'm saying is I'm surprised it's taking you this long to be the guy who listens to an indie music podcast. You were already there emotionally, I think.
Yeah, I suppose it never really occurred to me. Instead of just been like reading about like indie music on a constant basis. Let's see, Bronze Banter for the 4th last time, like probably ever. Like, I mean, it's funny because we already did our finale, and I think that was, I'm not like, so the plan currently is that we're going to do the next 2 episodes after this, which are going to be the end of the Buffy rankings and the end of Angel, which I'm excited about. And then we're going to, in a bit of breaking news, we're going to do the Buffy movie. Finally.
Yeah.
And then with the Buffy movie, in that episode as well, we will do a ranking of every season. So, we'll talk about why season 7 is actually the best season and season 5 is the worst.
It's overrated, really.
So this is gonna be a lot of fun, but I mean, like, I don't think for that episode we're gonna be like, oh, like emotional goodbye or anything. I think it's just gonna be like, oh, it's over now.
No, this is a coda.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a victory lap,
which is nice.
And then we're gonna do that episode and kind of
can runners up do victory laps?
Who are your runner up to?
Everyone.
No, we're first among sequels, I think. So yeah, we're going to do that for our last episode of this incarnation of Buffy Boys, and then the terrifying, undefying future follows. But today, what we're going to talk about for our Bronze Banter in this rain cast little recording set area. Rain, yeah,
just started.
It's very atmospheric. So 3 things I think top of mind that we've watched recently, 2 of which I remember. The other was Severance, on Apple TV. I'm always fascinated when maybe this is going to be like used against me in a court of law at some point, but I'm always fascinated when people's first question is, where can I watch that? Because I'm like, on the internet, wherever you want to. But if technically it is being broadcast on
we are
Apple.
We are watching Apple TV.
Yeah, we share. Yeah.
If you have a PS5, it comes with 6 months free of Apple TV. There's a hack for you, and I think everyone can get 3 months free of Apple TV just on a general basis because they're trying to onboard people. Yeah. And there's not a huge amount to watch on it. Ted Lasso is obviously pretty great. Dickinson, we really enjoy that. We haven't watched a huge amount of.
With my favorite person, one of my favorite,
Haley Steinfeld.
I'm a big Stein fan.
Yeah. And stuff like that. But one of its new Pachinko, actually, we were talking about recently, is also Apple TV. So one of its more recent shows is season 1 of Severance. I think we've spoken about it before, probably not a huge length, but it's a Ben Stiller produced adaptation, I believe, or maybe it's just someone else created it. But Ben Stiller is the producer, starring Adam Scott, most famous for
Party Down,
6 Feet Under. And I think best known for Tell Me You Love Me, 2007's hit erotic TV show on HBO. And I think some people might remember him from Parks and Rec as well. Yeah, some
municipal TV show. But yeah, so Ben Stiller produces an odd thing to league with in some senses, but I suppose he's not, his production and his like
his taste is better.
His taste is better in his acting, yeah, essentially.
Yeah. So I mean, like he's like highly associated with Marriage Story director, whose name I can't remember right now. It'll come back to me. But he works a lot with him. He's done a lot of like great stuff over the years. He's worked a lot with very associated with Wes Anderson at times. Like so Ben Stiller has been in some atrocious movies.
He has a behind the scenes pedigree that I think you can speak to.
Similar to Adam Thingamajig. What's his name? I need to stop doing this.
You keep wandering into things you don't know.
I know. Uncut Gems, Adam Sandler. Similar to Adam Sandler, where like, you know, his majority of his body of work is like odious, and every so often does like incredible stuff. So, yes, Severance. The basic premise of Severance, it's a science fictional thriller black comedy TV show about, the premise is like, what if you could get a procedure which meant that you split yourself into two personas who do not have access to each other's memories, one of whom exclusively goes to work and the other of whom exclusively does not work, in like a mega corporation, generic mega corporation of your choice. It's fascinating. It starts off a little slow, I would definitely say, but the finale of this season and the last last 3 or 4 episodes, maybe 5 episodes, were dark, gripping, exciting, thrilling. By the end of the last episode, I was like holding my breath and like let out a deep gasp at the end. It was highly thrilling. It was wonderful. Yeah,
it was a really interesting experience. So it draws a lot from, I suppose, visually, conceptually, from things like Control, David Lynch, the SCP Foundation, kind of creepypasta kind of stuff, you know. I
would say like early 80s futurism, you know.
That kind of intentional. The computers all look old to distract you or to obfuscate what era is actually made and that kind of thing. There's an otherworldliness to it, and inside the facility, just a lot of strange cult-like behavior, which is in the guise of a workplace situation, but you know, progressively gets much more and more disturbing. So yeah, it's kind of I suppose a slow build. There's a word for that, but it goes build gradually. And yeah, I think the first episode or two had some intriguing things in it, but maybe for us could have accelerated a little bit quicker. But it's so contrasted with the fact that by the last 5 episodes, like usually we would flip around and watch a few things, you know.
You watched the last 4 episodes back to back.
Yeah, so it was televisual. It has some interesting things to say, and I think it has a climax which is unexpected, and it's rare for me to say that I think every emotional moment in it, every story beat was earned, you know, and was well plotted. I was like, yeah, this is
very well developed. It felt like a slow burn for a really good reason, because by the end of it you were so invested, and so it was so well told as a story.
And the secret gay content in it
gay content, we won't, like, I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler, but like seeing which characters develop that direction is actually really fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So other people in the cast who would be notable, I think there's lots of great people in the cast, but they're not necessarily people you would know already. But Christopher Walken's in it, which is like, and he's not playing a minor character, I would say, and he's playing a very genuine character. It's a very odd performance by him. I really liked it. John Turturro, who would have been in a lot of Coen Brothers movies, I believe.
He was in The Batman, actually.
Yeah, actually he was. And Patricia Arquette is one of the main characters as well, who you might know from Boyhood or many acting things she's done. She's also like quite loud on Twitter in a good way, though maybe a little cringe. But it was wonderful. Cannot recommend it enough. I would say, like, as a whole for a season, I would give like a 9 out of 10.
Yeah,
it was really good. It started really slow. I'm very excited to see where season 2 goes. Other things we watched, we went to see Scarlet Witch and the Strange of Madness. Was that what it was called?
Are you asking me what it's actually called?
No, I know it was actually called, but I'm funny.
Well, what's it actually called?
It was Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Okay, great, yeah.
Which is the new Marvel movie directed by Sam Raimi.
Yeah, claiming to be a Doctor Strange sequel, which it technically is, but at this point, like, a lot of Marvel films are just next part in the Marvel, like, general story going on.
So true, yeah. We actually haven't been to see a Marvel movie in the cinema except for Spider-Man since Endgame. No, sorry, we did see Black Widow. Like, I don't know, there hasn't been anything great since Endgame really, except for the 2 Spider-Men, I would say. And like, I'm just kind of like, oh god, Marvel is so passé. I don't think anyone is really like there was a time period there where it was like there's real grace offered towards Marvel properties in the cinema, like which concluded with Endgame. But like up to like this by this point it's kind of like I mean, you know, if I don't see them, it's fine.
And yet we continue to watch and enjoy. We tend to. So so we went to see Multiverse Madness, which I think has been a reasonably hyped one for various reasons. There was like a lot of definitely.
Well, the gays love
gay
Wanda.
furore around like a Scarlet Witch, and it's so funny, you know, seeing people say encounter, you know, Scarlet Witch or these characters or these settings for kind of the first time because they only really engage with it through the films, which is absolutely fine way to learn about it. But you know, this film did not invent the concept of a multiverse. Like that's the bread and butter of almost all like comic books.
And also there are only the multiverse as a concept. This movie features 3 worlds.
Yeah.
As in they briefly go through a bunch of different ones. It actually only has scenes that take place in 3. And something that really fucking bothered me is they name the MCU universe as Earth 616, which is the classic comic universe. And it's just like, how does that mesh with anything? I mean, like,
it seems like a minor point, but it is actually I think indication a kind of a glancing understanding from the writing team of certain things which could have been done better, could be more important. But yeah, the comic book continuity classically is always the 616 universe, and then they've actually named that the MCU universe is like 9188 or something. So that is established. So it was just a lot. It really felt like a film that was very written. Yeah, like a lot of.
To me, like I know for like one of the things I knew going into it was that they had gotten halfway through filming without having finished the script, so it doesn't feel very written to me.
Well, I suppose what I mean by that is that you can see the edges of the scenes, and you know, things were written together for reasons, and the fact that we have seen from commentary that, you know, which is not uncommon in these films, but many of the actors who were in pivotal scenes together had never actually met on set. And so there's something very produced about it, and also fundamentally, I don't like Doctor Strange. Yeah. But what I will say is a positive.
Benedict Cumberbatch has gotten better over the years. I think he's gotten more easygoing. I think he interviews better. He's funnier. He's nicer. He's less awful in terms of the fan base around him.
I've gone from probably kind of hating him a bit to like just like not being a fan. But this sounds like I didn't enjoy myself. It was the most unusual Marvel film I've seen in a while, and I don't know if that's necessarily an indication of brilliance, but it was a fascinating watching experience, because Sam Raimi, who I'm obviously a big fan of, or a big fan of here on the podcast, 100%. Has an incredibly distinctive style, which you can see in 2 films, which like epitomized by Evil Dead and Spider-Man, and this film felt like a weird mishmash of both of those sensibilities,
and then also Marvel,
tempered by the Marvel standards essentially.
No, like, you know, I think I think we talked about this recently. One of the shocking things about going back and watching Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3 is that like they're deeply Sam Raimi movies at their very, very deep core, and clearly throughout. They're thoroughly Sam Raimi movies. Like in the same way that, like, you know, they are Darkman Part 4 kind of thing. You know, it doesn't feel anything. There's no breath between them. I love Sam Raimi movies as well, I must say. Like his highlights are incredible. We need to watch A Simple Plan. People love that movie. But like Drag Me to Hell, incredible. Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 1, Evil Dead 2, Evil Dead 1.
Both of Evil Dead 2 and 1 regularly get on like top 50 horror films of all time. It's some people's favorites. Oh, yeah.
I would Evil Dead 2 is in my probably top 20 horror movies of all time. Love those movies. And this is, you can see more Sam Raimi in this than you would other directors and other Marvel movies. I would say Taika Waititi in Ragnarok has a real strong directorial voice, and so does your man from Guardians of the Galaxy, whose name I can't remember. But like, yeah, it was a mess of a movie. Like, you know, I think it didn't hold together very well. Watching it as a process was like genuinely good fun, and I had a lot of time for it. The character progression of Scarlet Witch, fucking bonkers. I have no idea where they're going with that.
Actually, one of the main elements of it is it introduces America Chavez, played by Xochitl Gomez, who was in the Babysitters Club, which we really enjoyed in the first season. And her role in this is like very like kind of teen psychic exposition-y, but it is, you know, which is not her fault. She does perfectly well with the role, but setting her up for her own TV show. And I think I enjoyed that stuff. And I enjoyed that it was a comic book film. It was colourful and mad and all that kind of stuff. yeah, like I've rarely come out of a film, particularly a Marvel film, and be like, I don't know what I think about what I just saw.
Yeah, I know. And we should move on quickly because we're running out of time. But Joel, you watched?
Yeah, just very very briefly. I won't speak extensively on this, but I watched by myself. He-Man Masters of the Universe Revelation. I think I've gotten that right, but Revelation is in there. It's on Netflix. It was a Kevin Smith led sequel to the original He-Man cartoons, which aired in 2 halves last year. I haven't seen a lot of Kevin Smith. I don't think I'm necessarily a big fan, but and I also know nothing about the original He-Man.
Really?
Yeah, I know as much as the average person does. So a lot of the concepts that I was referring back to were fully introduced to me kind of in the show. But what I will say is that I think I've recommended before, and people might be familiar with the Castlevania TV show on Netflix. I think it had a very similar sensibility, and it actually initially it started off in like, yeah, okay, He-Man sequel, whatever. It really became kind of an examination of, if you have these cartoons where you have 2 people who are locked in all the characters are locked in permanent states of no character development. And they're always returning to archetypes. This really examined like what would happen. This is like what happens after the cartoon finishes. This is like when it breaks, when someone dies, when someone actually wins, all that kind of stuff, and what happens next. It's very light. It's in many ways, it had some fantastic fight scenes. You really got a sense of love, whereas like someone always wanted to see a properly, really beautifully rendered actual fight scene, using all the tips and tricks we know from animation now. The Skeletor in it is voiced absolutely flamingly by Mark Hamill. Like it is a camp villain taken to 90, and I loved every moment of it. And Teela, who is one of the main women from the cartoon, my understanding is voiced by Sarah Michelle Gellar
Who's that?
In a rare kind of modern performance, I think. But also her character is very Buffy-esque, and her journey, this minor spoiler, but the hero's journey in the show is hers. It's not He-Man's. And there's actually a lot of Buffy, like not allusions, but like similar themes in it, and you have Sarah Michelle Gellar voicing it, and just a great voice cast otherwise, and some really interesting examinations of really kind of the gender stuff that happens in He-Man, and some of the power dynamics, and and it never felt too cringy. It was a level of sincerity to it. It was like, oh, by the end, it's like, I kind of want to see Sarah Michelle Gellar's character kind of do this, and let's get this done and all that, So it's 10 episodes. They're short. I think it would be a fun watch for anyone who likes the stuff that we like. So speaking of, maybe Sarah Michelle Gellar, let's start with episode am I going to get this right? Our 21st in our rankings.
At number 21 we have Normal Again, season 6, episode 17, and Joel initially rated this 9.8 Glargul Kashmanic Spikes,
and Brian rated it 9.2 Coffee, Food, Kisses, or Gay Love. So this is Slayer Interrupted. This is Buffy through some, if I remember correctly, some demon slime or something. It starts to.
I literally just told you what happened, Joel.
Yeah.
It was Glargul Kashmanic Spikes that gave her
Okay,
it.
she got Glarguls, and it's split between 2 perceptions. One, that she is a troubled young girl who is in a mental health facility, although in Buffy it's probably an insane asylum, because it's always the 1950s in Buffy for some reason, because she believes she's the Slayer, and then her actually being the Slayer. So what's your strong feelings about Normal Again?
I think that Normal Again is slight. I think that most people wouldn't rate it as highly as we do. I think it's really disliked because of the potential lore implications, the continuity implications for Buffy, and for me, that's not a problem. I have no issue with that. I've no it doesn't feel like to me like this suggests that the entire thing is happening in a girl who has lost her mind in an insane asylum. I say that non-derogatorily. I think I think as a society we really have failed in terms of like communicating mental health difficulties with any sensitivity. Anyway, but it's one of the darkest episodes of the show. It's fascinating. The interactions between Buffy, Joyce, and Hank are heartbreaking. Just the struggle at the heart of it that Buffy experiences It's dark and complex, and it really reflects the themes of the season in a really very deep way, in that Buffy has to learn to not retreat into this world of adolescence and fantasy and perpetual childhood, fantasy, and instead has to embrace what it is to be an adult and what it is to take charge, what it is to take responsibility, what it is to give up on this idea that there is a heaven that I could return to, and I'm no longer attempting to do that. Yeah, it's dark, it's weird, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I think in watching it, it's one of SMG's kind of more nuanced performances. She really there's nowhere she doesn't go with her range over 7 seasons. You know what I mean? But she has to portray a lot of three people essentially in this. Both versions of Buffy, but also the one that is kind of giving into the situation. So at the end, where she is in the house and has some tied up, she is the monster in that. And there's an interesting reflection of how at the heart of that struggle is the fact that the Slayer is part monster, and what is a monster necessarily a negative thing, and kind of grappling with that. And I think you can draw some thematic DNA from Helpless to The Boggy to this, where it's this subgenre of Buffy episodes which are kind of about the family and her as part of a family, and always maintaining that she's not a superhuman. She's a very powerful, but she's still a person. And I think too much weight is given over the years to the lore implications, because I can point to any single genre show I've ever watched. I can point to an episode that suggests it's all a dream. It's a joke. Do you know what I mean? It's never meant to have any kind of permanent affect. And I think in this, it's another episode where we see her strength ultimately by making her vulnerable in the traditional ways, without that ever feeling exploitative. I often think that you can put
she's being exploited textually by the people around her, and she finds strength in opposition to that. And I think that's a strong way to show someone who is finding strength in her vulnerability. You know,
we never revel in her vulnerability.
No, I don't think so.
I think it's not the most slap bang episode of Buffy, but I think it has a really lot of heart to it.
Yeah, I think so too. I have no conflicted feelings about the conclusion of this episode whatsoever. It doesn't take it away from me. I know it does for some people. I think it's an interesting concept. I like what it says about Buffy. The conclusion as to why she decides to fight is that Joyce says to her, you need to fight for the people who love you. And Buffy's like, no, the real love I experience is not this fantasy. It is the real life where things are difficult with monsters, and where I have commitments and responsibilities, and won't be just won't just return to my parents' loving embrace in a perfect idealized fashion.
It's a weird one because it does kind of introduce the idea that in a world where monsters are real, if you feel like that there are monsters, you're not necessarily inherently wrong. Do you know what I mean? So that is actually a more complicated situation.
Yeah. Okay, next up at number 20, so into our top 20 now, we have Conversations with Dead People, season 7, episode 7. And Joel initially rated this episode.
I can read it.
I have it, it's fine. 9.7, awkward conversations with people you went to school with, and pretend that you know who they are when they say, how have you been? And you're like, oh yeah, but you don't actually know who they are, and then you're stuck, and then sometimes you have to say, no, sorry, I was lying.
And Brian rated it 9.5 microwaved marshmallows.
Lovely. Okay, so Conversations with Dead People, another format breaking episode. It's the only episode without Xander in the entire series. I wonder why it got rated so highly. So this is the episode where Buffy talks to Holden, who quite relevantly we were focusing on quite a bit as the same actor who played Knox in Angel. You have Spike doing murders and whistling away to himself. You have Willow talking to Cassie, who is actually the first, and you have Dawn experiencing extreme haunting and eventually being visited by a person suggesting that they are Joyce.
Yeah.
It is
to tell her that Buffy is going to betray her at the end, essentially.
It's a strong episode. What do you think of it, Joel?
Yeah, I think as you say, it's It's an episode that goes in when you start. It has a tremendous confidence because it's saying this is what we're doing for the next 45 minutes, 42 minutes, minus Alex.
Because it is, it's real time. One of the things I didn't mention there.
Yeah, and I think it introduces the actor who plays Holden, whose name we really should.
He hasn't done basically anything else. He's done these 2 shows, and he did Firefly, and he also did Wit, which I've mentioned before, but it's the Emma Thompson cancer made-for-TV movie directed by Mike Nichols from 2000 or maybe 99 or 2001, but which I love, and has a lot of Arvo Part music in it, and has this deep discussion of John Donne's metaphysical poetry. So I like it a lot. Yeah, so that's Jonathan M. Woodward, who plays Holden, and Azura Skye, who plays Cassie, who are both introduced in Buffy in this episode. And no, actually, sorry, Cassie's not introduced in this episode. No, Cassie's previously
introduced, but they're both, I suppose, minor characters who are featured in this episode. And it's an episode which it has to carry on the strength of its writing. Many shows try to do scenes like this, which will have obviously overlapping and complementary themes, but just comes off as really obvious or really strained, which this doesn't do. I think
the other spoke of the storyline is actually Andrew talking to Warren and then killing Jonathan. I forgot about that.
Yeah, so every one of those scenes are kind of equally. There's no location in this episode that is less interesting than the other in kind of a grand scheme of things. They all add value. They all do. This episode does a massive amount of work in developing like 5-8 characters, meaningfully. And there's some real emotional stakes to a lot of the conversations, and emotional like pain, like the stuff with Willow and Cassie initially around Tara being in pain and all that kind of stuff. The stuff where it is like difficult. The stuff with Dawn is so upsetting.
The Dawn content in this episode is heartbreaking,
but also like horrific. Like I remember the scene where she's being stalked by that monster in her house.
She gets like her face like lashed open by ghost tendrils.
Yeah, and she sees Joey's dead on the couch. Yeah. So it's a scene I always remember from Buffy as being like maybe a notch actually higher on horror than it usually goes. And yeah, the stuff with Buffy is like, again, she can carry an entire conversation with a new character in a way which is compelling to watch. And the stuff with Jonathan, like Andrew is a complicated character, I always think to kind of get into. But the stuff with Jonathan, I think, is genuinely sad. That's a character who I always enjoyed when he was in the episode. Problematic like all the trio are to actually like engage with. But I felt that his death was it didn't feel cheap, but it also did make me sad. To see him go.
Yeah. I think for me, the real highlight of the episode, though, is Buffy's interactions with Holden. Like complex conversations about being the Slayer, about being just an adult, about her position and her attempts to put structure in her life and stuff. It's really strong. It's a hugely enjoyable episode, and it's very, very good. I really like it. Okay, next up at number 19, we have Chosen, Season 7, Episode 22. And Joe initially rated this 9.2 Slayers.
And Brian rated it 9.6 Buffy Boys.
Ah, nice. So this is the conclusion of the show. I really like it, obviously. I don't think it's the greatest episode of Buffy by a long shot. I think it's probably, I don't know, somewhere between the 20th and the 17th or so. But it's very good. There's very little to not like about it. They really kind of like pull things together by the end of season 7 to deliver a hugely enjoyable, very touching episode, and specifically the scene at the very end, with Buffy looking off into the horizon, knowing that she can live a life now. It's hugely touching, and it's an appropriate send-off to, for my money's worth, the greatest TV character ever written.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We obviously talked about this extensively recently, but I think taking isolation, you might not think that Chosen is necessarily a great or a really great episode of Buffy, but these things do not exist purely in isolation, particularly on a show like this. It has the responsibility to deliver on a huge amount of character development to conclude a uneven season, but one which had strong intentions and had some good elements, to not disappoint compared to The Gift. in many ways, you know.
Which it does, but that's okay.
No, I would say it's not as good as The Gift, but I would say it's not the same as falling short. You know,
I agree. It's spoken of in the same breath, but it doesn't match that height for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to. I think it's a tremendous responsibility to effectively conclude the journey for a character who has meant so much to people. Many characters who have, and in doing so, it's a kind of great action adventure episode. It has some incredibly memorable scenes and moments. You remember, and we value the scene at the end with Buffy looking back, but I think that empowering all the potentials is so important to me.
Yeah, me too. That is like, unlike a lot of season 7, that is deeply written into my understanding of Buffy as a show and as a character.
And I think I have watched many TV shows, and there are many TV shows which are unfortunately cheapened by their finale, and often the conclusion of things, you try to take them separately, but if where you get where you're going, it can make the journey look more shallow in retrospect. I think Chosen actually manages to make season 7 better, because if season 7 ended on just another season 7-ish episode, if it was like whatever the one before it is with like the
Empty Places,
no, it's like The End of the World or something it's called.
Yeah, shit.
Exactly, like it was just like another one of those. The whole thing would be a damn squid, but I think it gives me fond memories of like, oh yeah, if you don't look at it too closely, it's like, yeah, potential's the first. It all works great.
Yeah, not to be rude, but I think this is probably the only episode from season 7. I mean, maybe some of the funny, weird episodes. This is an episode from season 7, most likely, if I'm just sitting down to stick on.
Yeah.
Because it's enjoyable and emotional and make me cry. Okay, up next at number 18, we have Graduation Day Part 1, Season 3 episode... No, we don't. Up next at number 18, we have The Zeppo, Season 3, Episode 13. And Joel initially rated this 9.2 kerosene-filled cakes.
And Brian rated it 9.1 warm, sticky things.
Yeah.
So The Zeppo. Great episode. It's one which I kind of, on the rewatch, I knew, oh yeah, this is kind of the gimmicky episode where Xander kind of off by himself. But... you know, it's just much better than that in practice. I think actually, now that we're talking about it,
it's one of the most tightly written episodes of Buffy.
Yeah, I think it has a Sam Raimi-esque quality to the whole thing.
Yeah, that's a great shout. Yeah.
And I realise now, without actually understanding why, I was thinking about them in the same breath. I think our problems with Xander as a character are well documented. Yep. There are many times in which he is enjoyable to watch, realistically, and I wouldn't write him out of the show. Do you know what I mean? Just write him better. And this is
someone else write him, i.e. not Joss Whedon.
Yeah, exactly. And this is an episode which really, I think he manages to trade on the credit of this and a few other episodes quite a bit. And like generally, Xander, as much as he is heinous in his behavior in the first 3 seasons, he's kind of a more enjoyable character early on. He actually manages to carry the entire episode by himself. I like, his plot of the episode by himself. I think there's a lot of comedy and kind of, this wouldn't be funny if people weren't paying attention to Willow. It's because Xander kind of getting beaten up here. Like, interesting. And what I always forget about this episode is the entire kicker of it is that it's not just there is an event happening that he's not part of. There's a full-on apocalypse happening in the library, and it's one of the earliest times in Buffy where they kind of make fun of the show in a certain way, because they're doing all the dramatic speeches and spells and last stands in the library. We're just not seeing it. Mm-hmm. And that's like fairly like ahead of its time, I think, in terms of just that humor landing well.
It's an episode I think that is easy to overlook as both a comedic episode or potentially just like a standard format breaking kind of thing. I think it actually has a lot to say because it's taking character and showing, giving Nikki Brennan a great opportunity to show off his comedic chops, his ability to hold an entire episode, which is he really can, and the conclusion where he essentially has to be brave, and he's inspired by Buffy to be brave, and it is wonderful, and then he shows further emotional maturity where Cordelia is, I think, chiding him at the end of the episode. Is that right? And he walks away comfortable with himself.
Because he actually grows to the episode in some degree, and the character is different before and after. So yeah, I think we can hate on for various other things, but this is a good episode, and this kind of speaks to the value that he does bring when he turns up.
Absolutely.
He's never never a villain or a coward really. He's just like a deeply like stupid person at times, but we like those people sometimes as well in our life.
No, this episode's a really good episode.
It's just fun. It's a fun episode. Like we should never undervalue the amount of just like having a great time watching it.
It's well constructed in every way. Okay. At number 17 we have Graduation Day Part 1, Season 3, Episode 21. Joel initially rated this 9.8 Lohechian, 4-winged soul killers.
Brian rated it 9.4 vacuous tramps.
Maybe I'm a misogynist. Like every single opportunity to rate something like,
but these all have to be things that people have said in the episode.
But why is that the thing that I'm sticking to in every situation? No, it's not. It's
because I go long and you like to go punchy afterwards. That's what happens.
I do like to go punchy.
So I think for a lot of these big impactful 2-parters, something which we have to bear in mind is what happens in each part of the episode or each part of the half.
And like in some ways, this is interchangeable with part 2. I mean, like I do emotionally take them as one part, but obviously you rate them separately for the podcast. So you kind of had to evaluate them separately. This Alone Graduation Day Part 2, incredible.
So when we actually went through what specifically happens before the credits end in this episode, so much happens.
Yes.
So I am kind of on record as feeling like there are stronger episodes of Buffy. There are more impactful episodes. Of course, I have an indelible place in my heart for Graduation Day, because I think that like the high school setting is my favorite setting. It is so dreamlike to me because I watched and saw it so much when I was like such an impressionable age, and a lot of it kind of out of the corner of my eye, and I think that I had never conceived something as big before as at the end of it you can blow up the school and move on. And I think that it is the end of us feeling that our protagonists are being bullied by adults.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like because not only were they fighting the forces of evil, that feeling of Snyder being an asshole or the mayor being really awful in this on a personal level, I think was something that was very relatable for younger people. And in this episode, obviously we have the whole build up to the end of season 3, but we find out and are engaged with so much important information. We find out kind of really what an ascension is, but specifically introducing in this episode the concept of an old one and a pure demon. And everyone being like, oh, we've met demons, and Anya, who plays such a useful function in this episode, because she can't lie, she's not an exaggerating character, and she's seen an ascension before and a true demon, and that is, I always thought it was so scary, and it was so it deepened the mythology of the world significantly.
For me the real important point of the episode is essentially because Faith has poisoned Angel with an arrow, Buffy has to find a way to cure her, which is the blood of a slayer. Cure him. She renounces the whatchamacallit, the council.
The Watchers Council, yeah.
Did you already mention that?
No.
She renounces the Watchers Council. Wesley's not happy. Giles supports her because they will not help Angel, and she goes hunting Faith. In a situation which is complex, messy. Their the Scoobies' determination to take Faith down versus their laissez-faire attitude towards Angel, towards other characters or Spike, who commit much greater atrocities than Faith do. It's messy. I don't think it's worth looking at beyond saying there's a touch of misogyny and after that let's try to enjoy it. But it's fascinating. It's complex. It's twisty. It's gross. It says something about Buffy's character that I don't think is enjoyable to think about, but is there consistently throughout, which is that she is cutthroat and she will do what needs to be done. Including killing a former friend. Yeah,
and there's an element I think of self-hate in this, which we see a lot more of in season 6. People's decisions. Yet the Angel gets such a pass in the show constantly, but people are irrational in that way, and she kind of hates Faith because of everything that Faith means about her in some ways, in a way that she doesn't with other people. And I think that the high stakes of like, it's so delicious when you hear, okay, it's graduation day, that's when the ascension is going to happen, and the mayor is the keynote speaker.
The mayor saying, "I will eat you."
So him turning up, and they're planning. You have this traditional scene planning to fight the bad guy, and you turn around the library and he is there, and that is fucking scary.
Yeah.
That is genuinely shocking. And he's saying that he's going to eat Buffy. It's so hateful. It really communicates something about how that kind of person that the Richard Wilkins is a veneer for true hatefulness.
Yeah.
And it's equally shocking and also like really heartening when Giles turns around and immediately sticks a sword through him.
Yeah.
Because Giles and Buffy share that ruthlessness, which, you know, and which they extrapolate in different ways. But, you know,
well, they're two older patriarchally symbolizing men who take very different approaches. You know, Giles, who decides to empower and support young women and young people, and the mayor, who has decided to utilize a young woman to get his outcome that he wants. And specifically, those things are happening in this episode where Giles supports Buffy and the mayor is using Faith for his own devices, and he certainly has a lot of attachment to Faith. That is the complexity of misogyny. But it's a beautiful contrast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, I think you could talk just about these two episodes for so long, because like The Gift is fantastic. I also think that if the show was cut short and ended with Graduation Day, those 3 seasons would be a cult classic that maybe not everyone watched as much of, but would be an incredible perfect story. Yeah,
I agree. And my last thing I'd say about this episode is that the throwdown between Buffy and Faith is, for my money's worth, the greatest combat scene in all of Buffy.
Yeah. And I need to actually, talking about it makes me think I have to appreciate it again, because whenever I think about that, I just think about the widescreen.
The widescreen, yeah, I know.
But
me too.
yeah, like her stabbing Faith, and then next season when Faith comes back and sees Buffy as like someone hunting her and kind of horrified, like it's such good television.
It's wonderful. Next up at number 16, we have Becoming Part 1, Season 2, Episode 21. And Joel initially rated this 9.7 thirsty Galwegian wigs.
And Brian rated it 9.1 I hate women. That's weird.
Oh, I don't even remember saying that.
No, 9.1 Orbs of Thessaly.
No, that was a bit boring of me. Okay, so Becoming Part 1 is part 1 of Becoming. Becoming Part 2 is the one where Buffy sends Angel into hell after he gets his soul back. So
is our season 2 finale?
Season 2 finale. As a 2-parter, incredible. This episode also very, very good, though it is mostly setting up the second part.
And this actually does something that Buffy gets away with so much, and we were talking about this in Graduation as well. Graduation Day. Is that in this episode we actually fully introduce a lot of concepts all at once that are like resolved in the next episode. So a lot of stuff about Cathala, about how the world ended.
Cathala.
I think, have I been for like 20 years been putting an extra A in there?
Maybe.
A Cathala. That there was a knight that had a blessed sword that pierced him that needs to be used, all this kind of stuff. And interspersed here, as much as they become so passe when you watch 5 seasons of Angel, these flashbacks where we understand more about Angel's life and his
interactions with Whistler, who was intended to be coming back in season 1 of Angel, but was replaced with Glenn.
Yeah, the whole premise of Angel was meant to work as Whistler takes him on another job, essentially. But but Whistler remains because of that, this really enigmatic character.
Love it. Yeah, and his appearance in just this episode. I don't think he appeared in episode or part 2 even. But
he appears in, I don't know if it's only one episode he appears in, but anyway, go ahead.
It creates a veneer of like mystery around him, which is just great. With all that, you have the action actually happening of what's going to occur in Becoming as an overall thing. I have a real problem here because I told you everything that happens in this episode and I kind of forgot to take it in myself because I was reading it out. Oh yeah, and you have Drusilla being terrifying throughout the episode, which I think is a really fascinating element to it. And you have Buffy and Willow finally finding the floppy disk.
The magic floppy disk. Yeah, so he actually only appears in this episode technically in flashbacks, and then in Becoming Part 2 he turns up and tells Buffy what she has to do.
Yes, okay, of course, yeah. But that's great. And yeah, so you have them finally finding the floppy disk, which for my money's worth is one of like TV's great MacGuffins of all time. You know, this
everyone
like
really cared about that floppy disk.
that like tortured me for weeks while watching it, because I would watch it like reasonably slowly when I had the VHSs originally. It tortured me.
And when you think about what we actually get in this episode in terms of flashbacks, like again, flashbacks have been done to death in the show, but we see,
I think this is the first episode of flashbacks.
This is it. Like, so we see Angel getting sired, we see Drusilla getting traumatized and turned, we see, you know, the stuff about him being. It contextualizes him in season 1 so much because he's a lost soul before that, immediately before that. And we see the flashback to pre-season 1 Buffy at Henry High when the first Watcher finds her and like says that you're going to be the Slayer. You know, it just, all that stuff, like this shows you that would do that. I was like, why am I watching all this backstory? But it feels so authentic here.
Yeah.
As because the show is actually quite sparing for a long time with giving that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And then at the end of the episode, of course, you have the very, very upsetting scene where Kendra gets killed by Drusilla, hypnotized and killed without a fight. It's probably why I rated this episode so low comparatively, given that it's clearly a cinematic televisionistic tour de force. Is that, like, you know, the murder of Kendra in this episode is like disrespectful and demeaning and dismissive. It's a great episode of TV. It's highly watchable. Really like it in lots of ways.
Yeah, and in rating season 2 stuff particularly, it's made me remember and appreciate how much of a threat Drusilla is in this show. Yeah. And I think obviously this is a great moment for that. So I think again, for Becoming Part 2 to work, this more than almost any other first part of a kind of a thing like this really needs to build that emotional weight and the sense of, something that's been developing for hundreds of years is coming to a climax, essentially. Yeah.
No, it's great. It's fascinating, and I'm a big fan. Okay, next up at number 15, we have Who Are You? Season 4, episode 16. Joel initially rated this 9.1 hastily rendered CGI Catras? Question mark?
I'm not sure why I said Catra to you, but Catra is the when you see a soul on Star Trek, it's a Catra. Yeah. And Brian rated it 10 tiny babies. So a 10, Brian, dial us in.
Yeah, so obviously I'm a big advocate for this episode. So for me, especially historic, looking back now, this episode is when taken in hand with Angel's maybe 2 best episodes, which are the 2 episodes with Faith in season 1 of Angel. It's probably my favorite Faith content. In this episode, we have Faith having swapped places with Buffy, and this episode is, for my money's worth, an incredible watch. You have the genuine comedic elements of Sarah Michelle Gellar pretending to be Faith.
Well, it's called acting when you do it professionally.
It's called acting, and Sarah Michelle Gellar is the strongest actor in this TV show, undoubtedly, in the sense that, like, you know, like she has extra opportunities to do it because she is the main character, but she's been overlooked for a long time. She was overlooked for a long time as like, oh, you know, Alison Hannigan's actually very good in that, or
it's not the first time we've gotten up on this box, but I'm joining you there 100%.
Anthony Stewart Head is actually really, really good, and so James Marsher is really, really strong,
so blonde.
Yeah, and like, you know, kind of like, oh, we don't have to talk about Sarah Michelle Gellar because she's kind of dull in some ways, or she just kind of plays Buffy straight. Buffy is the best written and best performed TV character for my money's worth. Full stop.
Strong words.
Yeah, in this episode, she plays comedy, she plays poignancy, she plays everything we need her to play, and it's really fucking good. I like it so much.
So I've discovered, to my justification, coincidentally, the device in this episode is called a Catra.
Okay.
Yeah, so I assumed it was because we saw her soul swapping or whatever. So I maybe need to revisit the episodes myself. Like, I obviously like them a lot, but yeah, I want to kind of take it in the Faith context as well. For me, this is a payoff of a lot of that, because obviously the Faith stuff in the previous part of this two-hander is good, but this is the one where we actually see her kind of blow up her Faith's life a bit, you know, as Faith, which is so interesting because, like, the first thing she does when she takes over Buffy's life is, like, her real aim is to actually, like, burn to the ground her previous existence. Yeah. And we have the confrontation in this episode
I think there's a moment where they're like, who is that? And she's like, it was nobody. And like, you know, like it's Fate's deep self-hatred is like so upsetting and heartbreaking.
It goes even further because when they're in the confrontation in the church, which again is like a great tense moment because of course a Slayer could fully hold a church full of people hostage, and she's so clearly gone for the deep end. When Faith is beating on Fate's body that Buffy is in, she's saying that you're a soulless bitch, you're a murdering, you know, monster, I hate you, etc. That is like you drown in it. You drown in the real sense of pathos about that.
Yeah, no, it's very upsetting, and it's a deeply existential episode. Ultimately,
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm looking at the episode description.
Actually, you're laughing at my joke. Okay,
no, it's just because I'm looking at the episode description, and something that jumped out to me is a line where it says Giles acts hysterically to distract the police so they can get inside.
He does do that. It's a deeply existential episode, questioning, you know, what makes a person who they are, and it's fascinating. It's wonderful. I love this episode so much.
Yeah.
Am I overrating it? No, I'm properly rating it.
I think if I was to recommend an episode of Buffy for people.
Okay, next up at number 14, we have Doppelgangland, Season 3, Episode 16. Joel initially rated this 9.8 licked necks out of 10.
And Brian rated it 9.7 sanity fares.
I think this is one of our earliest upsets in terms of like rating this as lowly as we have compared to some other things. What I just say is that we're incredibly passionate about our top 12 that's coming up in the next episode, or in the next two episodes. With that being said, incredible episode, brilliant comedy, brilliant darkness, brilliant gay shit. This is the episode where Willow accidentally conjures Dark Willow.
Oh, Vamp Willow,
sorry, into the standard Buffyverse. And
from the Wishverse. And
hijinks ensue.
Yeah, I think a lot of people like this episode for a lot of reasons. I kind of love that there's absolutely no reason for it to happen. Like, it is, in a good way, it's like there's no purpose for this motivationally other than it's a funny situation, it's a tense situation, it explores our characters further. I think after just talking about Sarah Michelle Gellar, like in both this and The Wish, but maybe even more so in this, Alison Hannigan gets to show that she can take. She's not just she's not portraying Vamp Willow as a seductive evil character. She's playing her as a seductive evil version of Willow, which is a different thing. And I think it always speaks to me with Vamp acting on this show how well people understand that the character has to be a perversion of the human character, and I think it's really interesting that where they take it with that is obviously the joke being that, you know, she's kind of gay, etc., but it also communicates that early on though Willow has this really inherent strength that is not necessarily super apparent to the show. You know, we know that as a viewer, and we love her, and she does many great things, but she becomes essentially one of the most powerful people on earth by the end of the show. And I think that's kind of expressed in what Vamp Willow can bring to the fore, which I think is really at the heart of the vampire metaphor. Yeah.
Mm. I think it's wonderful as well, and just in terms of the like structure of the season, in the sense, just in terms of the structure of the season, in the sense that like obviously Alison Hannigan just blew it out of the water with The Wish, where like her vampire Willow was seductive, terrifying, innocent, creepy, kind of gay, and she gets to return to it in this episode in a fuller sense, and you kind of feel like that should be diminishing returns, and instead it's highly comedic. It's incredible to see her interact with herself, and I love it.
And you see both versions of Willow pretending to be the other version of Willow at one point.
Yes.
And it works, and you believe it, you know? That is not easy to do. And
it's not easy to write either. It's a mess, you know?
No, it's not. It's there's also like a whole stretch of the episode where the gang just think Willow's dead.
Yeah.
Which I think really like reminds us that in those early seasons, like the danger really was that vampire could just kill someone. Yeah. Yeah,
and it kind of felt like it lost that over time, but it's pretty wonderful. I do also like the end of the episode where like the alternative Oz immediately stakes Willow as soon as she comes back to the thing. He thinks she's going back to be given another lease of life.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen. I think it's very funny.
Yeah, it's great, and I think again, we've obviously analysed the queer content on the show every which way from Sunday, but
This is a good one.
this is an really valuable piece, and people like it and people care about it for that reason.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, and relatedly, next up at number 13, we have The Wish, season 3, episode 9. Joel initially rated this 9 goblets of O negative out of 10.
And Brian rated it 9.4 at board nows. And we didn't tinker with this with the intention of putting these together either, which I think is quite fun. I didn't appreciate how close kind of after The Wish Doppelgangland comes either. Like, it's not a season later or anything. It's only a few episodes.
Yeah.
But yeah, The Wish being the classic episode of Buffy that introduces the vengeance demon on Yanka.
Everything after this is from this episode, like I would say after the Zeppo, everything has been just an unreservedly brilliant episode. I have no tiny hesitation in my mind, and it goes on throughout. Like this episode, like I would say, for my money's worth, with a retrospective, if we're saying, I would say that like everything from after the Zeppo in our ratings here, perfect 10s is just a matter of preference.
Yeah, and perfect 10s for any other show as well. And this episode, kind of along with Graduation Day, a personal favourite, I think.
Yeah.
So this being the episode where Cordelia crucially makes a wish,
having been skewered recently and quite upset.
Yeah. And the wish is that Buffy would never come to Sunnydale. Is that right?
That's it.
Yeah.
No, she wishes that Buffy had never come to Sunnydale.
And definitely the most impactful wish we ever see Anya do. We're transported to an alternate version of Sunnydale, which is overrun by vampires, and gosh, there's just so much to do there.
Yeah.
It's still a town. If you remember correctly, there's a bit of release. So Cordelia is a stranger in a strange land for a bit in this.
And she wanders past the espresso pump in the same way that Vampire Willow does in Doppelgangland.
Yeah, 100%. She runs into, if you remember, Harmony, and Harmony's dressed in like really dour clothing because vampires are more like
attracted to bright colours.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff. And Cordelia, weirdly kind of like spends a good bit of the early part of this episode trying to like understand and get back and kind of resolve and all that. But she dies.
She does get killed.
She gets killed pretty early on
by Willow and Xander, which quite upsetting.
Yeah, so it's
Willow and Xander who are vampires. I think it's an interestingly structured episode in that way. It also sees us. It's the only time we see Xander as a vampire. It also sees the return. Again, which is reasonably usual for the show compared to other shows, I think, of the Master just fully in this episode, having taken over Sunnydale. What's his name again? The actor?
Oh, I'm blanking on that. Sorry. And we see Angel having been imprisoned by the Master. Mark Metcalf.
And whenever he arrives, he does an amazing job.
He does. And we see Angel in prison in this episode, having never been able to fulfill the destiny which we learned was so important to him in season 2. So great stakes. I really believe the threat of Sunnydale. We also have Giles running the White Hacks. So like the good guys standing up. We have Oz. We have Larry, who is gay and still alive in the primary continuity at this point as well, and a woman who is like never mentioned in any other context,
which I think is appropriate.
But that was a very compelling image for me as well. And then obviously the resolution being kind of unusual. It's not resolved by anything kind of in some ways that the main characters do intentionally. It's Giles confronting Anya. If you know what I mean, like basically what I'm trying to get at is we do see that Buffy comes to town in this episode. She comes from Cleveland. She's a Buffy who is isolated, wearing eyeliner,
dark and
much more of a weaker character in many ways, a weaker Slayer, because she doesn't have a support network. Feeling she has to confront the Master. There's I
think what we said at the time was that like this is not a Buffy who would have been able to catch the sword at the end of season 2 from Angel.
100%, and we see that because, again, like usually in these kind of episodes, it is the alternate version of our characters who resolve things. And so Buffy goes and confronts the Master. She's killed by the Master. It was brutal fight scene. Angel is staked. everything falls apart. And although I appreciate that it is Giles who resolved it, he's kind of off by himself in his apartment.
What he says to Anya when he gets to summon her is like, she's like, what are you doing? You don't have any idea of like what's going to happen. He's like, I have to believe it's better than this. And it's very emotive.
So she says, how do you know this world was better? The other world was better than this one? And he says, because it has to be. And it's great. I love it. It's one of my favorite Giles moments.
It's a great episode. It really holds a mirror to the show. It just shows that like this show is highly ambitious. Like this is a wild concept episode to put out reasonably early on into the whole thing and do it with such aplomb, with such brilliance, with such care and fun. Really wonderful episode.
And it's always a great show for it kind of only ever really does things once or maybe kind of twice.
Yeah.
But say a show like Stargate, which I love, but it's done a Wish type episode maybe once a season.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's only one, The Wish in Buffy, and I think it makes it really ephemeral and interesting.
Okay, there we are done for this episode. So next episode we're going to go through episodes 12 to 6 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. They're all fucking bangers. I can't wait to talk about every single one of them. We will go too long on those episodes as well. I'll not be fine with that.
I fully had the energy of someone who was ready to go further. I didn't realize we're on the last episode, so that's good.
Yeah. Okay. So should we move into the Cordelia chase?
Absolutely.
Having spoken about one of Cordelia's best episodes, just right there, actually.
Yeah, so we have 2 episodes of Buffy, or 2 episodes of Angel we watched, which is Underneath and Origin. And Underneath is focused at the whole show is essentially turning at this point towards the conclusion and starting to empower the conclusion. So in Underneath we have the gang going to find Lindsay, because what they realize or what they actually, I think hilariously they realize they've never known anything about what's happening at any time essentially in the grand scheme of things. So they have to go and they want to go and find Lindsay to find information on the senior partners to empower them for the apocalypse. So they find him in a Wolf from a Heart holding dimension, which is, hilariously a suburban, neighborhood that he's in. But every day he goes to the basement and a demon rips his heart out. So there's an adventure plot, pretty straightforward Angel kind of adventure episode where they go on a mission to do a thing and have to figure out how to resolve the D&D like puzzle in this house that devolves into genuine comedy, because as soon as they try to remove Lindsay, everyone starts blasting in the neighborhood. The mailman takes out an Uzi. The perfect wife comes around the counter with a shotgun. The little boy who's helping with his homework pulls out a handgun as well and starts blasting away. It's bizarrely actually kind of fun, and it resolves with Gunn deciding to remain behind, to sacrifice himself to allow them to leave, to atone for what happened with Fred, essentially. And on the other side, we have Adam Baldwin, which, if I remember correctly, is of no relation, who plays Jane in Firefly.
And who is a shit person in real life. He is.
He joins the cast and is this like stalking Terminator-like figure in a suit that pursues the characters who stay behind for the episode. And it turns out it's actually to fire Eve and take over as the new liaison. So for whatever reason, they decided to work him in as a antagonistic character for the last like 4 or 5 episodes.
Yeah. A real Caleb type.
Yeah. So I'm going to speak about the Illyria stuff across both episodes, because it's very related. But yeah, I'd say I'd probably give this episode like maybe a 7.
I'm going for a 6. Didn't catch my attention.
Yeah, it was fine. I think I remember this episode really well. I remember the hell dimension stuff was interesting to me, so I'm probably more fond of it. But yeah, maybe a 7.
I think the Illyria content is good. I like that.
A low 7. And yeah, so the Illyria stuff is very similar between the 2 episodes. So can I speak to both of that? In the second episode, we watched Origin. A family come to Wolf from Heart. It's like, oh, my boy's super. Why is that? I was like, oh, shock, it's actually Connor. And
he just like Angel sent Connor to this family to be taken care of, and they got him knocked down by a truck immediately within like 6 months. So this is actually an episode I don't remember super well, or I'm not super familiar with. But essentially, they're like, why is Connor here? Why is he being attacked, etc.? Angel being the only one minus Marcus who remembers who Connor is. So that tension kind of melted away after the start of the season, but I think this episode communicates that's actually quite a serious thing that happened. And weirdly,
your man whose name I forget who plays Connor,
Vincent Kartheiser.
Actually, honestly, his most likable he's ever been in the show in this episode, because he's playing an untraumatized version of Connor that is kind of goofy. So I actually didn't mind those scenes at all.
Yeah, my only thing I would say about it is that there's definitely a weird sexual tension between him and Dave Boreanaz.
Yeah, I can't really unpack that. And then eventually, in terms of setting up the conclusion of the season as well, we're introduced to a warlock, Cybus Vale, who is orchestrating this because he was responsible, and is able to do so because he was responsible for creating Connor's false life. And he needs Connor to remember who he is, to kill Sajong, who was the demon time traveler, who was the Deuter antagonist,
along with Holt
in that season. And if that has been an unresolved plot point. So again, a pretty fun adventure. It gives us an opportunity for Angel and Connor to talk about the father-son stuff in a way which is not incredibly tiring the way it was in season 4. And I think, to be fair, the episode does a decent job of tying up a lot of plot lines and just kind of leaving them there. The implication at the end is that Connor remembers who he is, but decides to stay with his family because he now appreciates kind of all the complexities of what actually happened. And across both of these episodes, we have, in probably one of my favorite relationships of the second half of this season, is Wesley trying to train Illyria, work with Illyria for her to understand humanity, to understand why he hurts, to understand what she is now, because she's not really a demon anymore, but she's definitely not Fred. And him doing various tests with her, and some great fight sequences where Spike is just employed to help train her, essentially, and getting the shit kicked out of him. And I forgot how much that Amy Acker as Illyria actually works in quite a lot of Anya-like comedy, because she doesn't understand human things.
Yep.
So,
I think one of the things I can say about this show is that Amy Acker is great in it.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a nice dynamic. There's a really upsetting line where Connor is attracted to Illyria, and he says, "I guess I have a thing for older women." And
Disgusting.
And Angel Mutter says, "I thought they fixed that."
Disgusting.
So yeah, I think I'm not to be repetitive, but I'd probably give this a 7 as well.
I give this a 7 specifically.
Yeah, and I think the actor Blake Sajan, who I used to know the name of on this, but I don't anymore. He's weirdly engaging as that character, even though I don't care about the character. And the crucial thing being that Wesley becomes incredibly suspicious of what's happened, because he sees all these clues that something significant happened, that Angel may have betrayed the team and Fred may have been the price. So that's why he breaks the spell to restore his memories, Illyria's and Angel's and Connor's.
Deeply regrets it immediately.
And immediately remembers everything that he did that led up to this point.
Because in lots of ways, Angel did this in a way to repair his relationship with Wesley on some level.
I'm interested. A perfectly watchable couple of episodes.
After this is all pretty good though, right? It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I'm learning that I do enjoy this season, even if it feels ultimately pointless is too strong, but it feels like a victory lap. It doesn't feel like it matters, but it's fun to watch.
It's so funny because season 1 is so of Angel, it has some of the worst episodes of TV I've ever sat down to watch, and also some of the best Angel content. The Faith stuff is so good, and the Buffy stuff is so good. Maybe they should just make it I know, make
more Buffy.
Yeah.
I think we'll leave it there.
The other way that there was a while where Wolverine was in every X-Men comic and his own comic at the same time. They should have just done that with this as well, where Buffy was in Buffy, and then also an Angel with Buffy, and then also in Faith with Buffy. Maybe with young Ripper, she appears in apparitions to Giles.
Yeah, flash forward or something. Where she I can totally see this, where she, in some time weirdness, she could play an older Buffy, could play a mentor character to a younger Ripper.
I have a better idea. So when Ripper goes home for the first time, you kind of see him doing all these crazy things, and it turns out at the end of the episode, the twist is that he actually lives with his parents still, and he's actually not that cool and independent, and they're actually put him down quite a lot. And at the end of it, they're like, Rupert, what are you being so stupid? You should go and talk to your big sister. And I'm better doing an English accent than this, I promise. I'm taking the piss. And he's like, fine. And he goes upstairs and he opens the door, and Buffy's sitting there, and he's just like, Giles, how are you? Something like that.
She might call him Rupert.
Yeah, Rupert. How are you doing? And she has an English accent. And
what's all this then?
And the whole thing is like trying to figure out why Buffy is Giles' sister, and it turns out to be some weird magical like thing for him to watch him and become like, you know, guide him to become the Watcher he becomes.
Get that spec script in, Brian.
Could be great.
Yeah. Okay, folks, thanks so much for listening, and thanks so much for joining us. We're into the marrow next week. So if you enjoyed this episode, please let us know. Tell your friends, tell the four-winged Lohechian soul killer demons in your life, and we'll see you next time on Buffy Boys.
See you then on Buffy Boys. That's
Cheers.
when we'll see you. Goodbye.